Thank you, Representative Jetton. This bill is about list maintenance, which I think we can all agree is important, and I want to be very clear that I support proper list maintenance. I think we all do. And as a brief aside, believe the most important thing we could do here is online voter registration, but that's for another day. So let me ask you about specifically, can you talk about the various provisions of this bill that facilitate proper list maintenance and why you think that's also important?
Sure. Within this bill, it primarily focuses in on what information is provided between the cross-check system and the state for identification of potentially convicted felons, registered to vote in more than one state, and then puts in parameters for what the private system must possess and how much it can cost.
You know, part of, I think, the concern anytime we discuss list maintenance is, are we engaging in strong match versus weak match? And is the data source good so we avoid purges, accidental people getting taken off the list, which we've seen even very recently in Texas. Can you speak to that at all? Any safeguards or guardrails so we make sure that nobody is being accidentally removed from the list? We want to make sure as people,
Sure.
get to retain their right to vote.
Yes, it's absolutely important that we have good information that's exchanged between the states. When you're looking at things that are such as the National Change of Address system, the information that's provided for a hard match needs to include, not only their name, but also identification features such as security numbers, date of births, different parameters like that to ensure that we're keeping our list clean and only purging out those that have a strong match.
To me, working on this bill with you, it kind of has two groups taking some control here. Agency doing some things directly, also allows contract with a private entity. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So can you talk about some of the sorts of reasons we want that two-pronged approach or how that looks?
I think that we want to have the flexibility in place for either a state program to exist to coordinate between the states or allow for a private entity such as what we're dealing with right now with Eric to be able to help manage that data between the states.
I got a few questions yesterday because we were going kind of fast about my amendment, which you accepted. And I appreciate you working on this bill with me. We did a few things. First, there was concern about the initial bill identifying people convicted of a felony instead of identifying people not qualified to vote under Section 11.002. With my amendment, we fixed that. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And the reason behind that, and I got a handful of questions on this, is we wanted to make sure this matched the standards for eligibility to be able to vote and not some new standard not related to Texas law. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. And Representative Reynolds was also interested in putting together that amendment and appreciate their work on making sure that we perfected this bill.
Yeah, you're right. Representative Reynolds said something similar, so I want to make sure we were addressing that concern that we had heard. I think part of the reason it's so important is to avoid, any kind of purge where someone who's eligible to vote would somehow be removed from this list, show up on election day, and then not be able to cast their ballot. So I think in the case, it could be folks who have served their time and discharged and sentenced and re-enter society, correct? That's what we're making sure that those people don't lose the right.
I might have missed some of that. Yeah, we want to make sure that there's parameters in place that only hard matches, only those that aren't qualified to vote in the state are purged from the list.
So our amendment made sure we matched current law with this standard yesterday.
That's correct.
It also, one of the things I just heard about earlier today was concerns about privacy and where will the next cross-check go. With the amendment we did, it requires background checks for any vendor's employees, right? Not just top brass. All of the employees will have to have that background check. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So why do you think that's important for safety and protection around our voting data?
Well, as you know, the last thing we want to happen is a data breach or information to be shared with anyone outside of those that are supposed to have it, that aren't, that are doing anything outside of voter cross-check from state to state. We want to make sure that we're protecting people's privacy.
I think as whether it's through Eric or any cross-check, we want to make sure that we have the strongest list maintenance possible, but also that nobody's data is breached, that everyone can feel secure as they participate in their democratic process. You know, again, I think one other thing we did on the amendment, and I thank you for working with me on it, is the National Change of Address Registry. This is a secure data set of approximately 160 million permanent change of addresses records constructed from names and addresses of individuals, families, and businesses who have filed a change of address with the Postal Service. Isn't that correct, what the National Change of Address is?
That's correct, yes.
Why is it so important, Standard, that the vendor contract with and work with the SOS writ large on this?
Sure. That set of information paired with any other information from other states, DPS, vital statistics, whatever it may be, the more sources they have, especially reliable sources like the National Change of Address database, is a helpful, definitely a helpful component to ensure that we're getting good information.
Reporting from March says that the same day that Florida backed out of ERIC, a case of a man voting twice in the 2020 election was found thanks to data that Julie Marcus, the election supervisor in Pinellas County, where the case occurred, says that information from Virginia to Florida came down through ERIC. This indicates that the reliable and tested system of interstate voter data via ERIC is necessary and, in fact, better to voter integrity. That's an example of what we try to do with crosscheck. Is that not correct?
That's absolutely correct.
So in this case, being in a system like ERIC helped to ensure that this person did not vote twice from Virginia to Florida.
That's absolutely correct. Our intention is to remain with an interstate voter registration crosscheck program. It is important to election integrity.
So let me just ask, based on this bill, if we were to leave ERIC, are there currently alternatives, or where are we headed?
I know that there are definitely states that are exploring alternatives, and we want to make sure that while those are being discussed and viewed, that that this legislature puts in parameters that we want to make sure we have from our future program. And that could be whether we stick with ERIC and ERIC complies with that, or we go to a different system. I think that we have a responsibility to make sure that we are sharing pertinent information only, receiving pertinent information only, and getting a good return on investment.
But to be clear, we could stick with ERIC.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, and so I think you agree with me, just to kind of wrap this up, that based on that one specific example, it's so important that we have a cross-check and we have a reliable one that protects voters' privacy while giving the SOS strong list maintenance. You agree with that?
Absolutely. I feel pretty confident that everybody in this room would like for us to remain within an interstate cross-check registration program.
Thank you, Representative.